Alrighty, so I was enjoying listening to Prometheus Rising by, and then I blank on his name, of course, Robert Anton Wilson. And it just stopped. It stopped. So I'm going to continue it. Chapter 8, The Moral Socio-Sexual Circuit. As the caterpillar chooses the fairest leaves to lay her eggs on, so the priest lays his curse on the fairest joys. William Blake, Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And there are images. If you want to look it up, it's really easy to find a PDF. They're just floating everywhere. So, the sociosexual circuit is activated and imprinted at adolescence when the DNA signal awakens the sexual apparatus. The teenager becomes the bewildered possessor of a new body and a new neural circuit oriented to orgasm and sperm-egg fusion. The pubescent human, like any other running animal, lurches about in a state of mating frenzy, every call gasping for the sexual object. Imprint vulnerability is acute, and the first sexual signals to turn on the adolescent nervous system remain fixed for life and forever define the individual's sexual reality. We should not be surprised, therefore, at the various fetishes that are so easily acquired at these sensitive moments. In fact, we can tell precisely at what period in time a person was sexually imprinted by noting which fetishes continue to turn him or her on. Black garters, booze, cool jazz, and crew cuts define the sexual signals of one imprint group generation just as rigidly as sleeping hags, marijuana, heavy rock, and tight jeans define another. As Masters and Johnson have pointed out, most sexual dysfunctions are hooked into the nervous system at these adolescent moments of acute imprint vulnerability. Their archetypal case is that of a male who, about to mate for the first time in the back seat of a car, was traumatized by a policeman flashing a light on him and his paramour. The imprint of that ghastly moment was hooked for decades. The male remained impotent until re-imprinted by Masters and Johnson in their clinic. The choices of heterosexuality or homosexuality, brash promiscuity or timid celibacy, etc., are usually imprinted by exactly similar accidents at points of imprint vulnerability. Just as biosurvival anxiety or security are imprinted by accidents in the nursing period, emotional domination or submission by accidents in the toddling period, symbolic dexterity or stupidity by the accidents of the learning environment. Primitives, so-called, know these facts and surround all the points of imprint vulnerability with rituals, ordeals, rites of passage, etc., while designed to imprint the desired traits of a well-integrated member of that tribe at that time. Relics of these imprint ceremonies survive in baptism, confirmation, bar mitzvahs, marriage ceremonies, the Masonic raising, etc. It is important to realize that chance, genetics, and malice, anger, are among the accidents that create imprints at points of vulnerability. Most humans do not, due to accidents of this sort, imprint exactly the socio-sexual role demanded by their society. The fourth circuit can almost be called the guilt circuit. Almost everybody, almost everywhere, is quite busy hiding their real sexual profile and miming the accepted sex role for their gender and their tribe. In ordinary language, the imprint of the socio-sexual circuit is generally called the mature personality or the sexual role. It is the parent in the jargon of transactional analysis. It is amusing to note that Freud recognized the first circuit as the oral stage, the second as the anal stage, and the fourth as the genital stage. He did not notice the third, semantic circuit, perhaps because he is an obsessive rationalist who was so absorbed in verbal and conceptual programs that they were invisible to him, as water may be to fishes. Similarly, Jung described the first circuit as the sensational faculty, the second as the feeling faculty, and the third as the rational faculty, skipping the socio-sexual circuit entirely. There may be a clue as to why Jung could not abide Freud's fourth circuit emphasis and built a separate, less sexual psychology of his own. Jung then went on to lump the higher circuits under the rubric of the faculty of intuition. It is the function of the nervous system to focus, to select, to narrow down, to choose from an infinity of possibilities the biochemical imprints which determine the tactics and strategies that ensure survival in one place, status in one tribe. The infant is genetically prepared to learn any language, master any skill, play any sex role in a very short time. However, he or she becomes mechanically, robotically fixated to accept, follow, and mimic the limited offerings of his social and cultural environment. In this process, each of us pays a heavy price. Survival and status means forfeiting the infinite possibilities of unconditioned consciousness. The domesticated primate inside the social reality tunnel is a trivial fragment of the potentials for experience and intelligence innate in the, what is that, 110 billion cell, okay, human biocomputer. As Robert A. Heinlein wrote, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, design a building, con a ship, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve an equation, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. But as long as we remain on the antique circuits, we are not very different from the insects. That is, just as the insects repeat their four-stage program, egg, larva, chrysalis, adult, from generation to generation, we repeat our four-stage cycle also. The antique circuits are genetically conservative. They ensure the survival and continuation of the species, but do no more. For future evolution, we must look to the futuristic circuits. Summary. All right, so circuit one, the origin, 3 to 4 billion years ago, imprint sites, limbic and ans, Freud, oral, Jung's. This is just kind of a grid you can look at. So, it is sometimes mistakenly stated that there are no universal sexual taboos. This is not true. There is one omnipurpose tattoo which exists in every tribe. That taboo stipulates that sexuality shall not be unregulated by the tribe. That is, even though no other taboos are universal, the taboo against living without taboos remains constant. Every tribe has its own set of verbots and thou shalt nots, but no tribe allows the individual to choose his or her own set. An American president may not marry his own sister if he wants to get reelected. An Egyptian pharaoh had to marry his own sister. Controlled by this moral relativism, many social scientists have failed to notice the invariable. Both the president and the pharaoh are expected to obey local rules. So are the Samoan, the Russian, the Eskimo, and the Cuban. Why is there this taboo against sexual self-definition and self-actualization? Why is it that while no two societies can agree on what is sexually good and sexually bad, every society thinks that it must make some definition? The answer is that our first humanoids symbolizing and conceptualizing ancestors were very ignorant, but not at all stupid. They were ignorant of the laws of genetics, but they were smart enough to respect that such laws exist. Sperm-egg fusion is surrounded by violent taboos and fierce tribal conformity because the survival and future evolution of the gene pool depends upon which particular spermatozoa reaches which particular ovum. Etymologists confirm the Freudian theory that there are ancient linkages between the words for the sacred, the erotic, the obscene, the awe-inspiring, the awful, the divine, the thrilling. All of these are primitive, powerful psychological responses to the mysteries of sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, future evolution. The earliest god forms found by archaeologists are pregnant goddesses and ithyphallic gods, whatever that means. The most intolerant, bigoted, and recalcitrant of all prejudices, the very last to fade away after cosmopolitanizing. Contact with other tribes having different values are the taboos concerning the right way to reproduce. If one nation insists that the head of the state must marry his sister, and another insists that he must not, both are acting on the assumption that the right way must be found and rigorously enforced. There are unknowns in the area of sexual attraction. He likes her, but she doesn't like him. There are unknowns in the area of mating. A young couple can make love once and the woman becomes pregnant, yet another couple make love for 3 years and the woman remains barren. Very puzzling and frightening for primitives in New Guinea or New Jersey. Gods and goddesses are sexual and genetic programs expressed in primitive symbols. There are 3 unknowns in the area of reproduction. Why twins? Why 3 boys in one family and 3 girls in another? Why miscarriages and stillbirths? There are unknowns in the area of inheritance. Why doesn't my son look like me? In many a domesticated primate has wondered uneasily, leading to a great deal of paranoia and male chauvinism. There are unknowns in the area of genetic drift. Modern researchers recognize 12 or more variables, but still have more questions than answers. There are unknowns in the area of future evolution. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? The title of Gauguin's greatest painting, and would probably go Gans, whatever, is the basic ontological question. The totem pole, like the treatise on sociobiology, is an attempt to answer. Amid all these unknowns of sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, future evolution, the shamans of every tribe try to establish guideposts to tribal gene pool survival. Thus, morality is invented. Sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, future evolution. And morality is somewhere around mating. Well, morality is between sexual attraction, mating, and reproduction. Sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, and future evolution are all stochastic processes. That is, processes in which, out of random series, some intelligence or something that can be metaphorically conceived as an intelligence is selecting a final outcome. That these stochastic, no problem the first time, processes overlap, as shown in our diagram, is intuitively obvious, and it is also obvious that the future is being selected every step of the way. Taboo and morality are tribal attempts to govern the random element to select the desired future. Morality attempts to control the stochastic evolutionary process at 2 points, interfering between sexual attraction and sexual consumption, mating by taboos and commandments, or else interfering between mating and reproduction. The later case is represented by infanticide, a widespread birth control measure always justified by the local shamans on magical grounds, e.g., the infants selected for sacrifice are birch breaths or birthmarked or twins, or in some way stigmatized by the gods. The actual function of such practices, of course, is population control, and such customs are most common on isolated islands where runaway population would be a disaster. Similarly, the Judaic taboos functioned to channel all sexuality into increased population, since the ancient Jews were surrounded by large and pugnacious empires eager to conquer them. They needed more boys for soldiers and more girls to breed soldiers. The most idiotic and superstitious taboos, from the rationalist viewpoint, always had some function when invented. For instance, the most pointlessly elaborate non-genetic incest taboos, in which virtually everybody in the tribe becomes unavailable sexually to everyone else, force exogamy, marriage outside the tribe. This creates affectional alliances, family ties between tribes, and decreases warfare. Something like this primitive exogamy survived into very recent times in the custom of marrying one royal family to another. Every form of morality is, of course, irksome on some level to everybody because no individual has ever exactly the sexual imprint desired by the tribe. The more sophisticated totem cults, the higher religions, so dubbed by themselves, take account of this doctrine of atonement. In one form or another, this allows the individual to be ritually forgiven periodically for not being the perfect sexual robot decreed by tribal morality. This becomes hilarious only when one realizes that most of what domesticated primates are asking their priests to forgive them for consist of what Kinsey so accurately called normal mammalian behavior. "Oh, mighty one, please forgive me for wanting to fulfill my biological purpose." Time binding, the transmission of symbols and tools across generations, begins on the third circuit. Acute consciousness time is, however, intensified on the fourth circuit. The principal function of socio-sexual circuit in the higher primates is to form an adult personality, a parent. By definition, the parent is one who cares for the young of the species. By genetic necessity, the parent also cares about the young. In symbolizing humans, this means planning, hoping, and having aspirations. In the language of the mystics, this means being attached and trapped on the wheel of karma. The first effort in the most mystical traditions is to break this fourth circuit attachment by taking a vow of celibacy. The fourth circuit is located in the left neocortex, the newest part of the left hemisphere of the brain. It is linked neurologically with the genitalia, the breasts, fucking, hugging, embracing, poetry, protecting circuitry. Not poetry, just protecting. Persons who take their heaviest imprint on this circuit are beautiful. That is, their entire body has received so many sexual neurotransmitters from the brain that they are constantly radiating the attractive mating signals that make up our perception of what is beautiful in a human being. According to accidents of imprinting, they can be coldly calculating exploiters, totally repressed Puritans, or carry some other negative traits, but they always look like, send signals of, the ideal fucker, lover, protector. Once formulated, morality serves as not only a check on genetic drift, but a break against Circuit 3 innovation. The shamans, priests, etc. define which ideals are moral and which are immoral. Anything new and anything that will break the tribal cycle, i.e., take us out of cyclical mythical time into linear progressive revolutionary time, is usually defined very quickly as immoral. To say that religion and priestcraft have played a conservative role in history is an understatement. One might as well say that bubonic plague has killed a few people or that Hitler was a little bit strange. The chief role of religion has always been reactionary. This is at its evolutionary function in the dialectic of the circuitry of the brain. Circuit 3, unchecked, is like a cocaine monologue. You can't remember anything because everything is changing so fast. This is profoundly disorienting to the average domesticated primate, so the tribal moralist keeps stability and tranquility by acting as decelerators. The average person, similarly, is philosophically most open and curious before the adult sex role of parenthood is elected. After reproduction, there's little time for Circuit 3 speculations, and because of the sanctions every tribe places on heresy, i.e. new ideas, there is also little inclination. Thus, Circuit 3 tends to take us out of the tribal cyclical time into linear progressive time, but Circuit 4 loops us back into the cycle again. Homosexuals may or may not be the chief creators of cultural innovation, as some gay pride advocates claim, but it is certainly true that they have done more than their share. The reason? They are not trapped into roles. These 4 circuits are coded with 4 permutations of each into the court cards of the tarot deck. Thus, the Knight of Discs, representing Earth, according to the occultists, is the first pure first circuit type, all sensation, all oral demand, all viscerotonic. Behind their alchemical, Kabbalistic, theosophical jargon, most books on tarot are describing this type when they discuss this card, the pure, undiluted mama's boy. Imprinting the socio-sexual circuit. And there is a graph, and it's quite the graph. The Queen of Discs, or Earth-Water, is a mixture of first and second circuit traits, sensational, viscerotonic, oral, and emotional, egotistical, political. You better be damn careful to call her Ms. The Prince of Discs, or Earth-Air, is a blend of first and third circuits, and oral demand, and rational circulation, probably a very sharp and sharkest lawyer. The Princess of Discs, or Earth-Fire, is the first circuit orality mixed with fourth circuit sexuality. This fusion of exhibitionism with inflamed eros means she's probably starring in porn movies. In all disc cards, the first circuit predominates over the others. Queen of Cups, or Water, is emotion and territorial demand. Nelson Algren had her in mind when she said, "Never bed down with a woman who has more problems than you." The Knight of Cups, Water Earth, is emotion plus sensation, the pure predator, marauder, thief, rapist, or sociopath. The Prince of Cups, or Water Air, is emotion plus reason, the humanist, humanitarian, liberal, and ideal Unitarian minister. The Prince of Cups, or Water Air, emotion plus reason, the humanist, humanitarian, liberal, and ideal Unitarian minister. The Princess of Cups is Water Fire, an explosive mixture of egotism and sexuality, Scarlett O'Hara, the femme fatale. The Prince of Swords is Air, all pure, undiluted intellect. His feet never touch the earth. He lives amid floating abstractions, the monk scholar. The Knight of Swords is Earth, reason and oral exhibition, the actor, orator, demagogue, sometimes the artist. The Queen of Swords is Water, reason plus emotion. The greats in science and art are generally of this imprint group. The Prince of Swords is Fire, reason and sexuality, the good parent, usually the Puritan, but sometimes a crusader for sexual freedom. In any case, the motivating drive is an attempt to impose abstract reason upon the genetic imperatives of the mating urge. The Prince of Wands is fire sexuality at its most powerful. These types are usually, but not necessarily, quite promiscuous. Sometimes they pour all their erotic energy into one mate and raise huge families, parenting being a strong part of the Fourth Circuit. In other words, J.S. Bach, or an example, J.S. Bach, who may have written the sexiest music in history, had 20 children. The Knight of Wands is fire earth sexuality and sensualism. The Playboy, Reichs, phallic narcissist. The Prince of Wands is fire air sexuality plus reason. These types are likely to get involved in the kind of empirical mysticism that is not tolerated by the local authorities, e.g., the Tantrists in India, the Knights Templar, and witches in medieval Europe, Aleister Crowley and Wilhelm Reich, most recently. Crowley said this card was a portrait of his true self. The Queen of Wands is firewater, sexuality, and emotion in emotional politics. The law courts have a steady parade of this type passing through every day. The clever Kabbalists who designed this... Kabbalist. Interesting. The clever Kabbalists who designed this pictorial key to the four primitive circuits include a clue to higher consciousness, for they teach that each element in traditional alchemy, earth, air, fire, water, corresponds to one of these tarot suits: discs, swords, wands, cups, and to one of the letters in the holy, unspeakable name of God, Yahweh, or the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So, Yahweh, depending on how you want to say it. The correspondences are as follows: Yod, fire, wand, circuit 4, Hey, water, cup, circuit 2, Vav, air, sword, circuit 3, and I guess Hey again, earth, discs, circuit 1. Though, I guess you're just supposed to know that one's before the other. The logic of this imagery is quite clear to the unconscious mind, and these associations appear frequently in dreams, as Jung documented in Psychology and Alchemy. And there's another table. The arm of the Kabbalah is to make the microcosm mirror the macrocosm. That is, to make the human being a perfect image of God. This means putting together the four alchemical elements symbolized by the letters Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, in other words, bringing the four circuits into balance. This is the same lesson as taught in the Buddhist mandalas, with four demons at the corners and circle representing awakening in the middle. The married look, the mom and dad look, etc., which are not scientific concepts but which everybody can recognize at once, have to do with an acute time sense. The parent is concerned not just with acquiring biosurvival tickets for personal nurture, but with acquiring tickets for the young and for the future. Behaviorists tell us wonderful stories about the intricate patterns that can be conditioned into experimental animals. See, they say we have, by selective reinforcement, trained this rat that at the sound of a bell he runs up a ladder, presses button A, races across a plank, and down another ladder, presses button B, dashes across the cage, and waits at the food slot for his meal to arrive. Lest anybody think this book is written from a perch of superiority, consider the similarly but more complex behavior which the author followed for 20 years. He would set an alarm clock before sleep every night. When the alarm woke him, he would breakfast hurriedly, rush off to catch a bus, ride to subway, change to the train, ride to an office building, rush through the lobby, board an elevator, ride to a certain floor, enter an office, and toil at repetitious and generally pointless tasks for 8 hours. This behavior sequence has been shaped, as B.F. Skinner would say, by reinforcement delivered every second week in the form of biosurvival tickets. Money. These tickets were necessary for biosurvival of 4 dependent children. The reader of this book can probably remember somewhat dimly the imprinting and conditioning of each of these circuits. We all began as infants in a one-dimensional world, orally hooked to mommy. The further away from mommy we crawled, the greater was our biosurvival anxiety, and we generally returned to mommy as quickly as possible. The key imprinting incidents of this period, together with associated conditioning, determine concretely how much we can currently exhibit of anxiety or self-confidence, rootedness or explorativeness, dependency or independence. Then, when the DNA sent the appropriate RNA messenger molecules to the glands, endocrine system, etc., a mutation occurred. Our gross morphology, our whole body changed, and our minds changed in the process. This is our reality tunnel dilated into two dimensions when we rose up and began to walk about the house and started learning who we could dominate, who could dominate us, who could be dominated, emotionally bullied at some times and not at others. We developed out of amorphous biosurvival consciousness into stubborn individual ego. We were imprinted and conditioned with a particular style of emotional territorial politics. At this stage, we're imprinted and conditioned for dominance or submission, self-confidence or self-doubt, strong ego or weak ego, high pack status or low pack status, giving orders or taking orders, pecking order, Heron moral or Sklav moral. We were subsequently conditioned to switch between these reflexes depending on whether the person we were dealing with was higher in the pecking order or lower in the pecking order. Middle class people, e.g., Reagan, conservatives, John Birchers, etc., will always revere those higher in the pecking order, and equally will always have some reason to persecute, peck at the poor who are lower in the pecking order. Hence, they will say and even believe they are being robbed by the poor on welfare who get about 4% of the tax dollar and never notice that the military-industrial complex gets 72% of their tax dollar. This is normal mammalian sociobiology. After the second circuit reality tunnel is wired in, the organism molts and mutates again into the verbal stage and a third circuit style of mentation imprinted. That is the top of the, that is, on top of protoplasmic consciousness and mammalian ego, we acquire human mind, which is created by and creator of human artifacts and speech. Feral children who survived in isolation from human society, artifacts, and speech have no mind in the human sense, which is why they are called feral. In the semantic stage of imprint vulnerability, we acquire fluency or inarticulateness, dexterity or clumsiness, good mind or dumb mind. Why do we say dumb, mute for stupid? Because a good mind means a good mouth, and the human mind is a verbalizing circuit. At puberty, another DNA trigger fires and RNA messengers initiate another morphological mutation of body-mind. The adult personality is imprinted and conditioned. We become moral or immoral, robot obedient or robot disobedient, solid citizen or sexual outlaw, parent or anarchist. One or the other. Lack of understanding of these morphological changes and their persistence in imprint circuits in the brain is responsible for most failures in communication and for the general sense of exasperation with which we too often confront each other. Since everybody's imprint are a little bit different, the average is that which nobody totally is. We all feel at times like the legendary Quaker who told his wife, "All the world is mad but me and thee, and sometimes I wonder about thee." Reichian's disciplines of Dr. Spock and the Summerhill School, etc., have called attention with some impatience to the brutality and stupidity of many of our traditional child-rearing methods. These methods are brutal and stupid only if, like the above-mentioned heretics, one regards the goal of child-rearing as the production of a sane, balanced, creative, not created human being. This has never been the goal of any society in the real world. The traditional child-rearing methods are quite logical, pragmatic, and sound in fulfilling the real purpose of society, which is not to create an ideal person, but to crate, C-R-A-T-E, a semi-robot who mimics the society as closely as possible, both in its rational and its irrational aspects, both as the repository of the wisdom of the past and as the sum total of all cruelties and stupidities of the past. Very simply, a totally aware, alert, awakened, unbrainwashed person would not fit very well into any of the standard roles society offers. The damaged roboticized products of traditional child rearing do fit into those slots. That is, there is a neurosociological logic to the illogical. Our traditional schools, very much like many prisons, Do they stifle imagination, cramp the child psychologically and mentally, and run on various forms of overt or covert terrorism? Of course. The answer is an unambiguous yes, but such schools are necessary to train people for roles in the ordinary office or factory or profession, which are also very much like mini prisons, stifle imagination, cramp the person physically and mentally, and run on terror, threat of loss of buyer's survival tickets in the form of paychecks or tenure. The permissive movement in child rearing appeared only when it did, and has succeeded only to a limited extent because society has always needed and still thinks it needs human robots. Utopian child rearing will advance further necessarily only as society itself evolves out of authoritarianism. That is, as the accelerated changes now occurring propel us into the most rapid period of social evolution in all human history, we will then need citizens who are not robots, who are creative, who are not docile, who are innovative, who are not narrow minded bigots, who are explorers in every sense of the word. Traditional child rearing began to falter only when society began to enter into the present period of accelerated change and technological omni-transformation of all traditional values. Failures in communication generally derive from sending a message to the wrong address. That is, your husband has an ego problem, and you send a message to his mind. Adapting a diagram from transactional analysis is what has happened is this. From transactional analysis, what has happened is this. It's a little chart. It goes from one natural child to four parent, and then from 3 to 3 adult or computer. The message is addressed from circuit 1 to circuit 4. It means, I feel weak, help bolster me up. If the answer comes back from circuit 3 to circuit 3, well, let's analyze the problem. There has been a wrong address. Of course, this example is deliberately untypical, although not impossible. It is untypical because women traditionally are trained not to make this kind of mistake, to be emotionally sensitive, to be supportive, etc. It is much more likely statistically that this kind of wrong address will go the other way, husband to wife. That is, the wife signals help, and the husband on circuit 3 says, let's analyze the problem. We have said that the imprinting of circuits contains a large element of accident within genetic parameters. Society everywhere, without understanding this theory, understands enough pragmatically about imprinting processes to attempt to program each individual for his or her assigned role. Hence, traditional girl rearing is different from traditional boy rearing, so that women will have more circuit 2 sensitivity. Again, women's liberation, like modern child rearing, arrived only when we were evolutionary ready or nearly ready for it. The traditional system worked in traditional societies. Similarly, class structure, like the caste structure in an insect hive, works to produce the right imprints in each class. The third circuit of the servile class and proletariat is imprinted chiefly for manual dexterity, while the same circuit in the middle class or ruling class children is imprinted for verbal, mathematical, or other symbol-using skills. Democracy has been less than a total success, and the intellectuals' half-shamed cynicism about democracy is justified, to the extent that traditional society did not need, could not use, and in many ways discouraged the development of high verbal rational skills in the majority of the population. That is, concretely, most people are not encouraged to be very smart and are rather heavily programmed to be comparatively stupid. Such programming is what is needed to fit them into most traditional jobs. Their biosurvival circuitry works as well as that of most animals, and their emotional territory circuitry is typically primate, and they have little third circuit mind to verbalize, rationalize with. Naturally, they usually vote for the charlatan who can activate primitive biosurvival fears and territorial patriotic pugnacity. The intellectual looks at the dismal results and continues to believe in democracy only by an act of blind faith, similar to the way beliefs in Catholicism or communism or snake worship are maintained. Again, the traditional system works for traditional society. A mass made of people who have an intense curiosity about why Beethoven went in for string quartets after his Ninth Symphony, or whether Kant really refuted Hume satisfactorily, or what the latest quantum theories mean in relation to determinism and free will, is not a mass that will easily be led into a dull, dehumanizing labor at traditional jobs. Why did Adlai Stevenson lose to Ike Eisenhower, George McGovern to Tricky Dick Nixon, etc.? It was the wrong address problem again. Stevenson, McGovern, and other darlings of intelligentsia were speaking to the Third Circuit, which is not very highly developed in most domesticated primates yet. Eisenhower, in his fatherly way, and Nixon, in his bullying big brother way, knew just how to push the right Second Circuit emotional territorial buttons to get a mob of primates to follow them. They were genetically programmed alpha males in ethological terms. Similarly, the moralist, i.e., the adult personality who has imprinted heavy ethical imperatives on Circuit 4, is often totally unable to communicate with the scientist or technologist. The moralist may even decide, many already have, that the scientist per se is inhuman. In fact, morals are fairly irrelevant to the Third Circuit analytical mind, which is the brain function the average scientist is imprinted most powerfully. To the Third Circuit, the only morality is accuracy, the only immorality is sloppy thinking. Again, the rise in social science among the scientists is happening only when it was evolutionarily necessary that it happen. In other words, after Hiroshima, if it doesn't seem to be happening widely enough and quickly enough, well, the same can be said also in error, I think, about modernizing education and child rearing, about women's liberation, about racism, etc. The rebellion against all the follies of the past is succeeding and will continue to succeed only as we evolve into a society which needs each human function well on all circuits. We are moving with ever-increasing speed into such a society. What the impatient radical forgets is that many of the injustices of the traditional primate society were not even perceived as such by the best minds of 1,000 years ago, or 100 years ago, or in the case of institutionalized sexism, even 30 years ago, and this was written like the 70s, or in the case of, if we can see injustice and absurdity in many age-old institutions, it is only because we are evolving out of robothood at precisely the point in evolution when it is necessary for us to become smarter and more sensitive on all circuits. Each of us has a favorite circuit, that is, a circuit that has been more heavily imprinted on than the others. Miscommunication, misunderstanding, and general misjudgment of one another is vastly increased by the fact that few of us know about these levels of circuitry, and we all tend to assume that the person we are interacting with is on the same circuit we are. Thus, there are narcissistic oral first types in every social group. Present them with a problem, and they will immediately look for somebody else to handle it, since the oral stage is robotically imprinted for dependency. Or, if they have imprinted hostile weakness instead of dependent weakness, they will explode in anger, infantile tantrum, raging that a problem exists and that it has been imposed on them. A second circuit type in the same situation will attempt to frighten the problem away by barking and blustering at it, mammalian fashion. The third circuit type will try to reason out the problem. This is the best approach, only with problems that are themselves rational. In other words, how do you make this machine work? It can be blind and futile when the problem is another human being acting out of one of the more destructive Second Circuit rage programs. The liberal is the one who leaves the room when the fight starts. Somebody once said, Third Circuit types are most confused and feel impotent when the Second Circuit mammalian politics takes over the scene. A Fourth Circuit type will try to be rational, Third Circuit, and to sense the emotional dimensions of the problem, Second Circuit, but will basically try to impose a moral solution. Now, this is the decent, fair thing to do. This may or may not make sense to the Third Circuit rationalists looking for objective justice, and it would usually make no sense at all to the totally Second Circuit type dominated by emotionalism and territoriality. What is true of the group is true of the individual. While we all have our favorite circuit and tend to see the circuit as superior to all others, we can be pushed out of it by shocks or stresses, in which case we jump to another circuit. The most robotic rationalist will descend to the first circuit eventually if threat to biosecurity is forcibly enough presented on the screen of consciousness. And if presented from leaving the room when the fight starts, the rationalist will even descend to the second circuit mammalian howling and barking under sufficient pressure. Oliver Wendell Holmes referred to this as the hydrostatic principle in Controversy, whereby the fools drag everybody down to their level. The most robotic emotionalist may also move up to the third circuit temporarily if a problem remains intractable to every form of emotional bullying or con artistry. All of us will move to the fourth circuit parent role or superego. Even little children will do it imitatively if it seems that the only way to get what one wants is to appeal to tribal morality. Why, it would be positively indecent not to do it in the way grandfather would. Give us the child until he was 5, and we will have him for life, bragged some 18th century Jesuit. The Jesuit order of that time, as Aldous Huxley later noted sardonically, educated Voltaire, Diderot, and the Marquis de Sade. Obviously, their techniques of brainwashing were not perfect. Nonetheless, most people in most societies do grow up as fairly accurate replicas of the previous generations. Most children educated by the Jesuits have remained Catholics. Most children of Democrats do not become Republicans, etc. Considering the wide variety of philosophies available to any of us, nudism and Buddhism, scientific materialism and snake worship, communism and vegetarianism, subjective idealism and existentialism, methodology and Shinto, etc., the fact that most people remain in the same reality tunnel as their parents does indicate that acculturalization is a mind control process. We are all giants raised by pygmies who have learned to walk with a perpetual mental crouch. Unleashing our future stature, our total brain power, is what this book is all about. There is a Zen story, very funny, haha, about a monk who, having failed achieve enlightenment, brain change, through normal Zen methods, was told by his teacher to think of nothing but an ox. Day after day, the monk thought of the ox, visualized the ox, meditated on the ox. Finally, one day, the teacher came to the monk's cell and said, "Come out here, I want to talk to you." "I can't get out," the monk said. "My horns won't fit through the door." I can't get out. At these words, the monk was enlightened. Never mind what enlightenment means right now. The monk went through some species of brain change, obviously. He had developed the delusion that he was an ox, and awakening from that hypnoidal state, he saw through the mechanism of all other delusions and how they robotize us. Exercises. Recreate vividly in imagination your first orgasm. To what extent do you still use the same accessories stimuli to turn you on? 2. Try to change your sexual imprint. See if you can reach orgasm by some method that has been taboo or unthinkable to you before. 3. Imagine that you are Reverend Jerry Falwell. Explain to an imaginary homosexual why his sexual imprint is sinful and should be changed at once. Include instructions on how to change it. 4. Imagine that you are a gay man or lesbian. Explain to Reverend Falwell why you will not or cannot change your sexual imprint to please him. 5. Read Margaret Mead's Sex and Temperament in 3 Primitive Societies. Then write a 5-page proof that the taboos in our tribe make more sense objectively than the taboos of the tribe studied. Be serious about it. 6. Choose the viewpoint of the Samoans in Dr. Mead's book. Write a 5-page proof that their taboos make more sense than those of our society. Be serious about it. 7. Reread the paragraphs about the giraffe and the gosling. What does this tell you about your sexual imprint? What is your Jeep or ping pong ball? And that was chapter 8. I'll get around to chapter 9 sooner or later. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.